Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sian. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join me here to learn and to grow. As always, really quickly, I'm going to ask you one quick favor right off the top. If you get any value out of this episode, please do share it, take a screenshot, put it on Instagram, tag me and my wonderful guest, Dr. Jen Lyerly, and let us know what you took away from this. And send a link to a friend. Let them know we're having these conversations. And I am so excited. Honestly, I've been wanting to have Jen on the podcast for so long, and it's my fault for not getting her on sooner. I'm so grateful to Jen for being really impactful on my career and my journey into podcasting, and she's been so helpful for me. So thank you, Jen, right off the top, for being here and for being so helpful, for doing everything you've done to support me in my journey. I wanted to get that out of the way right now, and I'll probably say it again later. But just in case you don't know Jen is the co-founder of Defocus Media with Dr. Daryl Glover, but she's also the author of a very successful blog called the Idolatry Blog, which gets over 50,000 page views a month, and in previous months has hit even 100,000 page views a month, which is massive. In case you're not familiar with blog numbers, that's pretty impressive. She is a proclaimed contact lens enthusiast and myopia management enthusiast, and that's the type of stuff we're going to dig into in today's conversation. She is also the mother of a beautiful 3-year-old daughter. Thank you so much, Jen, for being here. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to be like, Harbir, I love your show. Obviously, I'm a big listener, first time caller. It's an honor to be here. And I am so excited to have this conversation because I know you share a lot of the same passions that I do in optometry. Yeah. So I think we're really going to get to nerd out together on this journey today's episode.
Yes, because you're also a self-proclaimed optometry nerd, right?
Yeah, Daryl was trying to help me find he's like, well, I'm the favorite optometrist. So what could your brand? And he was like, you're an optometry nerd. I was like, is that me? So then, but actually he was right. So that kind of has stuck.
There you go. It's okay, because I am a little bit too. And so I'm more than happy to geek out as much as we can today. So the main arc of the conversation is going to be myopia management, practice management, that kind of discussion. Honestly, Jen, I don't do a whole lot of clinical conversations myself on the podcast, but I do like to get into these conversations offline with colleagues all the time. So I think it only makes sense for us to start to have this conversation here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're into at work? What kind of gets you up in the morning and gets you excited to go to work daily? And then we'll go from there.
So I am, since I had my little girl, I am a part-time associate doctor at a private practice in North Carolina. It's called Vision Eye Care. I actually work for a really good friend of mine that I first started working with 11 years ago now. And she left the practice we were jointly at to open up her own place. And she had always said, Jen, one day I'm going to call you and I'm going to say, you need to come work with me. And, that was a joke for a long time. And then one day she really did call me. And I've been very happily with her for several years now.
That's awesome.
But yeah, as part of that, she needed a very part-time doctor 3 days a week. And that was exactly where I was at in my life at the moment. And we can probably talk about this a little later on. I feel like at being one of these part-time young females in optometry, that I hear so many conversations around what the new face of optometry has meant to reduce patient care hours and this demand for more optometrists, even though we should theoretically have plenty of optometrists. And I'm on the back end of that. And my response to that kind of is this was kind of the promise that I was told when I first applied to optometry school, right? This is a great career for someone who might, when they start a family, want to do something part-time when that's the right time in their life to do part-time work. And then maybe as things change for them and their schedule allows for more days to add back in, that might happen too, right? But that was kind of our promise when we first applied, was this is a great job for women because it gives you work-life flexibility for when you need that.
No, that's a very good point. We could talk about that more now, or we could talk about it more later, but that definitely it is true. That is the promise of optometry, is that it's a very flexible career. But also, I suppose, I didn't even, to be honest with you, I'm sure I've heard it, but it didn't really click for me that is part of the reason that we have this demand, or this lack of supply potentially. It still feels weird to me that there's a lack of supply of optometrists. I still feel even with all of the women who want to take the time and have the flexible career, there probably should still be enough ODs out there, but maybe I'm missing something, but they're definitely, I'm hearing it across all of North America that there's a shortage.
Yeah, and we have more optometry schools than ever before. Many
Yeah.
of the major optometry schools have bigger classes than ever before. So
Right.
we're graduating more optometrists than we ever have. Obviously, patient demand has greatly skyrocketed
I see.
because there's more and more people that are aging that need more access to eye care, and our rural communities are going underserved. So there might be like larger urban centers that do have enough eye care providers, but in rural areas, there's still a shortage of doctors because young people aren't moving to rural communities in the
Right.
numbers that they had in the past.
Yeah.
But I do think it's not just young women who are being part-time doctors, which is often how the conversation gets framed. Many older doctors are looking to take some steps back to enjoy more work-life flexibility. There's retiring doctors. There's people who've sold to private equity, and in doing so have gone down to a few days a week because it's no longer the practice that they own. So I think across all age demographics, you're probably seeing doctors in many cases working slightly less because of different changes that have happened in our world and in the climate of healthcare, where practice ownership isn't necessarily the path that everyone is doing.
That's definitely true. There's definitely been a change in that overall as well. And I mean, I'm one of those people too who likes to do a little bit of work-life balance and flexibility we were talking about earlier. I haven't really publicly like spoken about this, but right now as we're recording this, I'm in the middle of a 3-month parental leave as well. And that affects how many patients we're able to see in our practice and that kind of thing. So I'm it's not just women. It's not just, it's everybody. And I'm one of those people too. So we could definitely dive more into that a little later if we want to, but I want to get into, I want to share something and celebrate something first about you and the practice that you're in. And that is that you were awarded from CooperVision. Sorry, remind me again. Best practice, one of the best practices in North America, in the United States by CooperVision. So can you explain a little bit about that and what that means?
So for the past 8 years, CooperVision has run this great program where it recognizes 8 practices across the United States with a focus on practices that are really involved in their community and kind of focus on exceptional eye care. So, you just submit your application online. It's very easy. They'll probably be accepting applications for 2024 very, very soon because the 2023 winners were just announced. And they also have a student program where they recognize students who are excelling in same thing, kind of community education and building those kind of skills for incredible practice and patient care. And it's just a really great thing for me. I wanted to apply because I felt like we work really hard as a practice. And the doctor who founded our practice, my boss, Alicia Barnes, she needed recognition. Our staff really needed some recognition because they are in the trenches every single day, and it can be a thankless job, and so to get any person on our team that moment be like, great job, more than just me saying that, someone recognizing us from outside and see like, you guys are doing great. I feel like that's really powerful for our whole practice and our staff especially.
I think it's incredible. Congratulations, and congratulations to the business owner and the practice as a whole. It's only 8, did I get it right? 8 practices across the country that are honored with this, awarded this. That's pretty incredible. 8 out of thousands of practices across the country. That's incredible. And yeah, you're right. I think probably more than anybody, the staff deserves that recognition because they often maybe don't get it, or they might not feel like they're so involved in the greater kind of growth of the practice. So it's great that you all get to celebrate that. Congratulations. And, tell me a little bit about what you think separated True Vision and made it one of these practices that was awarded this award. I feel like Austin Powers here. I'm like,
I think honestly, it's been our focus on specialty care from the very beginning. When I was coming out of optometry school, I didn't have a specific passion in, medical optometry, I guess you would say, but contact lenses, I really didn't think twice about, honestly. And I started working side by side with Alicia in this a group practice that we were at, and she was very passionate about 2 things: specialty contact lenses and myopia management. 2 things that honestly I didn't get a ton of exposure to in optometry school. And her passion was contagious, And I found in working alongside her and learning with her, because, the first time I fit a scleral lens was her first time fitting a scleral lens, and we did it together.
Cool.
And she was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what I'm doing, so we can learn this at the same time. This was 11 years ago. Okay, there weren't a lot of resources available for how to do it. And so I found like learning beside her with specialty care was absolutely contagious, and we continued to learn together, go to conferences together, educate ourselves, and she built this practice on the mission of like these specialty things that had captured her passion, which she's a person of many talents that included neurooptometry and vision therapy.
Wow.
So we have a lot of toes in multiple specialty areas. But I think me and then the other, Dr. Brandon Wyant that we practice with, that's been kind of a mutual focus that we all care about, is like, yes, we want to provide great general primary care, great medical care, but where can we go above and beyond and not just say, hey, you need to see someone else. We can't help you with that. Like, yeah, we can help you. And there's no reason that we can't take on that to help you with the very best of clinical skill and technology available.
That's awesome. And actually that's my practice, we are earlier on in that journey, right? So we are trying to carve out some of these specialties within our primary care. So we do draw a lot of dry eye, and we're leaning quite heavily into myopia management now. This is sort of the progression, but the next step actually is the specialty contact lens. So I have not fit a single specialty contact lens in my life. No sclerals, no ortho-Ks, no nothing. That's why I'm so happy now that we're having this conversation, because I'm gonna like take that enthusiasm you have, and I'm gonna start to kind of like draw it. And we're already, we've just purchased a topographer, so we're like starting to get into that now. But I'm definitely gonna call you, because the exact same thing as what you just said is like right now, I'll offer a parent all the options for myopia management. If they pick ortho-K, then I say, okay, well, here's where I'm going to send you. I'd like to say, okay, cool, I'm going to pass you on to this doctor who does it in our own practice, or our cones, or whoever patients who need those sclerals, I'm sending them off, and I'd like to keep them in-house. So we're just starting that. So, it's cool to hear that that's gotten you to this point where your practice is honored with an award like this, because you kept that passion going and growing that way. It's really cool.
I want to ask you, it was like my like share elevator pitch for why people should really consider specialty contact lenses. When's the last time a patient asked for you to hug them or like cried because they were so happy by like what optometry care brought to them? And
that's a powerful question. I would say it's happened. I don't know if I could tell you the last time. It was probably a dry eye patient in the last 6 months or so, maybe.
On Monday, me and my patient cried together.
That's
and
awesome.
I obviously it's emotionally, it's a lot, but like I have never felt more purposeful by providing specialty contact lens care, because the moment, she was in her 60s, she'd had corneal scarring from an HSK infection. This has been a multi-year journey to get everything kind of healed to a stable point, 2200 vision in that eye. And her ophthalmologist referred her over to try out specialty contact lenses. She has a lot of scarring. Honestly, we had no idea how clear vision could potentially be. She put on the scleral lens. I overrefracted. She saw 20/20.
Wow.
We both cried. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And obviously, not every single patient has these incredible results. Sometimes we don't get any vision improvement with the specialty lens because there is too much, so it's like, I never promise like, oh, these will change your lives. But when the lens can achieve something like that, you're like, oh, I am so thankful that I get to help you with this technology. This is such an incredible opportunity for me to be a part of this with you and to see the improvement it's going to make for your life.
That's profound. Honestly, that really is, to have that kind of impact on somebody's life. And I know that's possible. And we have patients already within our like current patients of ours that we know we can help like that. And it's sort of based on their hesitant. I've told them they can get sclerals and they can go somewhere, but they're sort of hesitant. But I know if I offer it here in-house and I will be the doctor to provide this, they would do it. And so I feel like I've been, I have personally been limiting their potential because I haven't been able to offer this. So I can't wait to bring it in. And I'm sure at some point along the way, I'll have those types of experiences, with some of our patients. That's exciting. And so thank you for giving me that extra little nudge. I'm going to definitely lean into it. Actually, next month, I'm going to a meeting by CooperVision on sclerals down in Arizona. So that's going to be my real push. So I look forward to really getting to it. And next time, I'm going to have you back on, Jen. Within the next year, I'm going to have you back on, and I'm going to share one of these powerful stories. I know it.
I know you will, because these patients are in your chair and they're ready for you to wow them with the possibilities of optometry.
It's official. It's been said in public here on the 2020 podcast. This is going to happen. Watch, I'm not going to release this episode for 6 months now. No, I'm kidding. I'm excited for that. I'm excited. So let's talk myopia management a little bit more. This is a super hot topic right now. A lot of awareness around it. Obviously, driven by some of the industry players, but also just conversations with colleagues, how we've been able to help our young patients and how we've been able to reduce the progression of myopia. But when I have a conversation with someone like you, it's obvious. Okay, well, you've been doing it for years. I've been doing it for years. It's sure, it's part of our practice now. But there's still a lot of people out there who haven't really done anything with myopia management. And not, I'm not trying to speak poorly of anybody. It's just sometimes you're just too busy to implement a specialty, or sometimes you're just not sure, do I really want to put a young child on a pharmaceutical agent, things like that. So I'd love to kind of encourage our colleagues and talk about what it takes to kind of just start, and talk about things like fee structures and things like that. I think these are really important things that are on top of people's mind. But tell us a little bit about what you do right now, day to day, as far as myopia management goes.
Yeah. Well, so my first piece of advice for people, if this is something you even want to dabble in, start with the FDA approved options, because that's going to make everything so much easier. The conversations are so much easier. And so we are going to get into some things that are not FDA approved that I offer in my practice, and maybe one day will be. But I personally think myopia management with the FDA approval of CooperVision's MySight lens, and then there's been subsequent lenses since, right? That's been the game changer, and why so many more people are ready to at least consider embracing it in their practice. So, my everyday practice, right? Our goal as an office, you'll listen to people, and this, Harbir, some people would be like, every patient's going to do myopia management. I'm going to prescribe myopia management to every child that's a myop. And I completely understand that mindset. And I think that makes total legitimate sense. It's just not the way that I necessarily practice with I don't necessarily I'm just not one of those I prescribe people. I've found that I actually have better success as thinking of, or defining my success as, have I provided education? Does the patient know about their options? And have I provided a well-rounded discussion of what those options are? And then empowered them to make the best decision, hopefully for their family or their personal self. And I cannot define my success whether a parent or a patient decides to pursue the treatment option that maybe in my heart I feel is personally what I would do if I was in their shoes. But at the end of the day, the patient's always going to be needing to be the one that's on board with that treatment plan. So I'd like to tell you, every single one of my children that are myopics are in a myopia management program. That is not the case. But every single one of my myopic children, their parents know about myopia management, and I have provided the education and some take-home information that it exists. So no one in my practice that doesn't know that it was not an option for them.
That's step number one. So I was telling you, I'm developing right now a lecture called the Myopia Startup, and that's step one. When I say, okay, here I'm giving you a 5-step plan to getting into myopia management. Step one is talk about it, and educate the patient, the parent. That's step one. And if they leave your office and nothing else happened, at least they're not going to go somewhere else and learn about it and say, well, my own optometrist never told me, right? And it's a good way to start to gauge interest and learn what parents are saying in return, and so you can kind of streamline your conversations. Very important to do that. So what is available, the options that are available here in Canada, what's Health Canada approved is not the same as what's FDA approved right now. but the MySight lens I know being one of the big ones there. So I imagine you do a lot of that. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, you go ahead. So our big three are MySight, orthokeratology, and atropine.
And so do you do all three of those?
We do.
Okay. And, I don't want to offend anybody, but like, do you have a preference or like one that you kind of lean towards? Let me ask you a question, Jen. The way that I get asked, and I'm sure you do, if this was your child, what would you do? Right?
Yeah.
So when somebody asks you that question, do you have how do you answer that?
You know what? I personally, and parents ask me this all the time, like, which one do you think is the best? Which one's going to be most effective? And the truth is, there's literally no study comparing them. So I cannot, with any science, tell my patient that one therapy is better than the other. In my personal opinion, each of them have pros and cons. Right now, I have a 3-year-old, and if she was showing signs of myopia, to me, right now at her life, atropine would be the only thing that I would be considering. If I have a 8-year-old patient that's playing a lot of sports and they're minus 150 already, like this is potentially a very good contact lens patient, and atropine and still wearing glasses might not be as good of a improvement to their overall lifestyle and like ease of daily life than if I do have them in a contact lens, whether that's a overnight contact lens like Ortho-K or a daily disposable contact lens. And I talk to parents about lifestyles, about their kids' responsibility level, cleanliness habits, where are we at as far as like hand washing and brushing teeth and organization. And then we together, that's why I kind of like, instead of me saying like, I prescribe this solution, like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about pros and cons and let's find the right fit for you through our conversation.
Perfect. That's the most, I think that's the most effective way to really get to a solution that's everybody's happy with, right? And just saying you should just use atropine, end of story, just doesn't really help everybody get on board. And I think it has to be that evaluation of all the needs and the age and the myopic progression and all those things. And that sounds like a lot. So now you've just said all of that, and that can sound like a lot to somebody who's like, well, I want to get into it, but now I have to have such a lengthy conversation with parents. But one of the things that you're able to have that conversation because you already know in your mind, okay, this is an 8-year-old child who's a -3 who likes to play sports. That calculation's already happened in your head. And so you can rank your recommendations accordingly. That happens, when you're going into myopia management. I will say it's important to kind of like set some sort of like system or algorithm or protocol in your head about like how you're going to offer treatments and then what happens next, right? So what happens when you offer Ortho-K? Where do they go next? You don't have to like think about every single step as you're doing it, because then it feels like it's a lot of work.
Sorry, and I feel like this is where I had a big learning curve too, because this is easily a conversation that can go down a black hole and is like an hour-long conversation about peripheral defocus if you're not careful with how you frame.
Yes.
And so I've tried to really kind of put some groundwork. So like this is my comprehensive exam, for example. Child is myopic. We also screen axial length, which in my opinion is not 100% necessary if you want to provide myopia management, but it is a fabulous tool that I found really helpful to be able to provide good myopia management. So if you're able to do that for your practice, I think you'll find it even easier to have these conversations. But, we'll talk about the normal stuff like, oh, this is the glasses prescription I'm finding. But I want to let you know that, in the past, we always just said, oh, your child's vision got worse. Here's their new glasses. And we know next year it's going to get worse by on average 0.5 to 0.75 every year until you're done growing.
Yep.
We don't have to let it keep getting worse every year, though. We have FDA approved treatment options to slow down how quickly this worsening is happening, to keep the prescription as low as possible and eyes as healthy as possible. And then I give them the pamphlet of information to take home. And I don't want them to make a decision right then and there, honestly. Now, maybe some parents are like, oh, let's talk a little bit more about this. And I will. But in the trying to keep within my comprehensive exam slot time, I know there are certain things that we need to kind of have is like, this is a first time conversation, just like lay some groundwork. And then we're going to have a staff member that I've got that's dedicated to this kind of discussion to call and follow up with parent. usually an interested parent is going to be following up with us pretty immediately. And if they're interested in any of the contact lens related options, I always bring them back for some additional contact lens measurements. A corneal topography, it's essential if we're even considering orthokeratology. And then I always do corneal thickness too, because I personally, if you have a really thin cornea, I don't want to do orthokeratology on that. I feel like there's some risk factors, and you'll be surprised at how many kids you start screening that they do not have keratoconus. But I had, I'll have 7-year-old -2 myopes, pretty normal looking Ks, and I'll do a topography, and there's some irregular steepening. I do a pachymetry. They're like 470, 480 thickness. I'm like, And so now our conversation has gone from myopia management to also like discuss like there may be some risk factors for keratoconus that we want to like make sure we're not rubbing our eyes really hard. And like, so I think it's pretty essential to do some of these screenings that you probably won't do at your general comprehensive exam before you make a consideration for what contact lens might be safest.
Definitely. So again, a lot of stuff that we could start to dive into once we got the ball rolling and you're starting to have these conversations with your parents, the parents of the patients, and you want to start offering more solutions like the MySight or the Ortho-K or atropine, whatever. But then you need to have some of these adjunct tests that are going to be helpful. And you can't just do it every time as screening, obviously, like topography and corneal thickness. But it's good to like, that's like kind of the second or third level now when you're starting to dive into it more. Do you do anterior seg OCT then? You imagine you have that if you're fitting sclerals and stuff?
We do. We do that for our scleral fits all the time. I haven't been doing it for any of my myopia management stuff.
Well, I was wondering for like the corneal thickness, you're doing like the little.
Oh, I am measuring that with my. Yes, you're right. Sorry. Yeah.
You're doing
That's
how
I'm doing the pachymetry reading. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have it. We don't have anterior seg OCT yet, but I think that's going to have to be one of our next purchases. Axial length is obviously very important as one of the measurements, but we've been like you said, I don't think it's vital. You don't need it to start doing myopia management. We still don't have it, but that's like part of the process now as well. Is like, oh, there's always new things to buy, new toys to get. You get the mybographer, and then you got to get this thing, and oh my god, there's so much stuff.
A little tip that we were able to purchase old IOL master from ophthalmologist who performed cataract surgery who had upgraded his technology. And so, I mean, this is like a very old piece of equipment. It's not fancy looking, but all I needed it to do was an A scan. And it takes a great axial length. He sold it to us for $1. So you may find an older ophthalmologist with a piece of equipment sitting in a closet collecting dust. He is not looking for a lot of money to sell it to you.
Jeez, it's quite the bargain. Wow. Okay. I'm going to start looking. Was it on Facebook Marketplace or where are you shopping for this?
We actually, crazy enough, we like called around to ophthalmologists to be like, do you have a piece of equipment you don't need anymore that we could buy from you? And he was kind of like, I'll just give it to you. You're like, no, we should buy it. Like, we don't want like any weirdnesses. So he was like, all right, $1. And we said,
I am going to call my staff after this conversation. I'm going to get them to start calling all the ophthalmologists in our area. Like, what are you trying to sell right now? What can we take off your hands?
Yeah, I mean, it's
a great idea.
Investing in axial length doesn't have to be cost prohibitive. And I'm sure there's way better, like the pieces of equipment that can do a whole lot more.
Well, so yeah, anyone from like TopCon or someone listening to us right now is going to be like, no, don't do that.
I mean, you're going to need a topographer. Then if you can get everything all in one, then that's obviously great too. So
yeah. There's lots of different ways to go about it. And I've always found, so for anybody who's listening, who's thinking about getting into myopia management or who is already dabbling and wants to go a little deeper, like any specialty that like I have kind of made a decision to go into, most of the time that decision is determined and decided by the conversations I have with colleagues like Jen and people who are ahead of me in that. So I highly encourage you to go do that, speak to other people and see what mistakes they've made, what's worked really well for them. You can skip past a bunch of stuff, by just speaking to someone and hearing what worked and what didn't work, and speed up your process a little bit, smooth your process out a little bit as well by doing that. So please do that. So Jen, we're talking about myopia management. We want to start, implementing this more in our practice, but we know it's going to take chair time. It's going to take multiple visits. It's going to cost the practice money. How do you start to develop that, management fees and things like that when you're bringing in a specialty?
So first off, you kind of have to decide, all right, how many times would you be seeing this patient? And so for us, the way we've outlined things is you've got your general comprehensive exam, then scheduling a myopia management consultation where we would be devoting a time slot to talking about the program in full, taking these additional measurements that we were just talking about to see if you would truly be a good candidate for any of these options. Sometimes we rule out certain options based on the results of our pachymetry and topography. We'll do the myopia management calculator from Brian Holden Vision Institute, so I can give the parent a really good idea of what are our risk factors here, what does the technology suggest we would accomplish by implementing a program plan. And let's say you're slower, you could potentially do all of this at the time of their general comprehensive exam. But if you're a busy practice and you're afraid this is going to bog you down, I think having the separate appointment is a great way to offset that. For us, we've got that appointment. And then let's say they enroll in a program. With orthokeratology, you might see these patients back a number of times. And so you need to factor that chair time in designing lenses. Let's say you do a MiSight, that's a soft contact lens. It's going to be kind of no different than fitting a soft contact lens where you've got that INR that you're doing. You need to see them back for a 1 to 2 week follow-up. And then depending on how quickly their myopia has been progressing, do you want to see them back at 3 months to repeat measures? I always see my patients back at minimum at the 6-month mark to kind of check in and make sure that we're achieving good control. Because if we need to, the last thing you want to do is undercorrect your patient. And I think we are all familiar with that study. If you've got an undercorrected myope as a child, they're going to change much faster than if they were fully corrected. So you've always got to make sure that you've got a full correction to get your best myopia management effect. So these are a lot of additional visits that you need to calculate. What is your chair time for expenses for your office, your rent, your staff pay, any equipment you're leasing, kind of do all of these numbers to know what does each appointment slot cost you. And then my boss always has a good reminder to me. She was like, and it's not just the chair time times however many visits you're going to be seeing those patients back, because then you're just breaking even and we'll still go out of business. We do actually have to make sure there's some profitability. And so another thing to kind of look at is if you're going to see a general exam, a comprehensive exam, what's your average, exam return for that patient? You're eating up an exam slot to be providing myopia management care. So every time you see a myopia management patient back at a no charge visit, that's one less comprehensive exam where you would have generated $300 some, maybe $400 some, depending on your clinic. So you got to factor your potential loss too by offering your specialty care. And then that's how you get how much you should charge.
Right. And that number it's probably bigger than what most people are initially thinking, and can be a little concerning or a bit of a deterrent sometimes. But that's kind of the point of offering specialty care, right? It's not something that patients will be able to get everywhere they go. There's got to be some value assigned to it as well that sort of differentiates it from the average services that they're receiving. I think that I know that in my mind, I would be afraid to charge $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever number for specialty care, because I say, oh no, but the patients are going to get upset that it's expensive, right? But that's one of those things that we have to shift our mindset on, definitely. Did you ever find that it was difficult once you kind of established a number? We don't necessarily have to talk about what that number is, but once you establish that number, did you have difficulty kind of implementing that, or did you feel no, this is what I'm worth, I'm good to go?
Well, so this is not what we're trying. I know there's all these rules, right? We can't talk about numbers because that's price fixing. Okay, so that's why we're not talking about numbers here. Just legally, we can't, right? But I'm going to throw out when I was first talking about implementing an atropine program. I mean, I used to do, oh, you want to do atropine? Yeah, I'll just write you a prescription. I literally charged nothing.
Yeah.
And then, we're like, well, we need to come up with a fee because you're going to see them back for a follow-up visit. And I was like, okay, $100. And that seemed to me
yeah.
Total. I mean, as a parent, I would still be okay with that cost. And then my boss was like, well, if you do the math on it, if you're going to see them back 2 additional times, Jen, you're really losing us a lot of money. You might as well just see regular exams and not offer atropine. And it took her explaining it to me, and it was like, oh yeah, I mean, you're right. and then once I understand the calculations behind why we need to charge what we charge, I don't have any trouble defending it, because I know, like, that's really, like, that's what we have to do in order to provide this care. There's no
Mm.
way for me to do it for less and still be able to provide this for you. I've looked at the numbers. And so I think if you're having trouble kind of justifying it to yourself that a patient be willing to pay for this, if you do the math and you understand why that's got to be, you'll stop having that trouble.
Do you find yourself, or did you in the past ever find yourself justifying it to the patient? Like over explaining? I know I've done that in the past. Oh, it's this much money, but it's because, rather than like, it just costs this much for the service. End of story. Like, where did you find yourself in that case?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes especially something that's a bigger expense option like orthokeratology. I'll have parents ask like, "Well, what kind of discount can you provide?"
Yeah.
And like, I get it. I do. It's not inexpensive. And then I'll say to them, I'm like, this is very carefully, like, we've looked at every way we can cut expenses for you to offer the most competitive pricing, but these lenses are extremely expensive, and the care we're going to provide for you, we are going to be seeing you many, many times. And I can without a doubt say that there's no way for us to provide this care at any less dollar amount than this number. And if this isn't the right time in your life to do this, hey, we totally understand. We've got these other options that we can support you with. Choosing orthokeratology really is this is a choice that you would make, but there's no way to do it for less expensive than this.
Hmm. That's fair, and that's a good way of putting it as well. Um, One of those options, going back to a bit of the conversation we were having before, stepping away from the price conversation, I wanted to wait, before I do that, is there anything else you want to say about the price conversation?
I guess my only other thing is, there's always this discussion, and this is in the States at least, about using insurance.
Hmm.
And with vision insurance plans, there's literally no vision insurance plan that recognizes myopia management as a covered service. So I want anybody listening to feel very confident in saying that and saying that to patients. A contact lens fitting and a myopia management program are not the same thing, and so you don't need to feel in any way apprehensive about saying like, yeah, this is not a covered service by insurance. And then it's totally up to you if you want to do a program. Some people will bundle the lenses and the service of myopia management together. And then some people will separate their professional fees for myopia management and the lenses as a separate product, in which case you could potentially bill lenses to insurance theoretically, but that is your personal choice. And you have to be kind of well versed in how your insurance reimburses contact lenses to make sure that even makes sense, because some plans do not reimburse you in full for your contact lenses. And you can start to easily decide like, oh my gosh, I'm losing money on this if you're accepting a plan that doesn't actually cover the cost of the lenses.
Yeah, that stuff is tricky, and once you guys start talking about vision plans and insurance down in the States, I am immediately so grateful that I live in Canada.
Yeah.
'Cause
It is
I
a
don't have
mess.
to deal
It
with
is a
that.
total mess.
But I mean, there's pros and cons. Don't get me wrong. But that's one thing I'm glad I don't have to deal with. But it is very important, of course, for those who are listening down in the States to look at that. I think that's really important, Jen. And if you have any other wisdom in that area, please do share it, because I'm learning more and more that providers can it can be a make or break, like a pretty clear make or break situation if you don't understand what the vision plan offers and
Mhm.
what you're giving to the patient. So that's actually very, very important information. So thank you.
Yeah. I
Anything
think
else?
this is why many practices in the United States that choose to offer specialty care, you'll see them often talking about dropping vision insurance coverage, because it creates this point of contention where a patient's like, but I want you to use my insurance. And then you're saying, but the insurance doesn't cover this service.
Mhm.
Like, it's never going to work out. And if you are not accepting the plan, then that removes that whole
Mhm.
issue. And in many cases, you can actually reduce your costs that you're providing to the patient, because you're not having that middleman of insurance interfering with things and siphoning money off the top.
I being from Canada and being kind of naive to that whole world of vision plans and insurance, I every time I come down to the States or I talk to friends down there, I always want to say, but then I stop because I'm like, these guys are going to be like, you don't know anything. I always want to say, just drop the vision plans, dude. Just charge cash. It's fine. But I know it's not that easy. It's a lot easier said than done, but it
It
seems like
is.
that is the path to success.
We have carefully selected the few vision insurances that we participate in and choosing ones that we feel like do reimburse us fairly for the services that we provide. And when you make a decision as a small private practice to drop a plan, it does hurt you. I mean, like, you'll notice an immediate drop in patient care volume. But what we've time and time again seen is, given a year, 2 years, patients start to realize, like, oh my gosh, the care I was receiving at that office was a different level. And we find many patients actually will choose to come to us out of network, even though that first year they might try somebody else. And
Yeah.
that's,
That's human nature.
you
I would
prepare,
likely,
you prepare to that first year to hurt when you do it.
right. And I think it's important for us to put ourselves in the patient's shoes. Sometimes I'll kind of go on a tangent here, but like we talk about the pains of like e-commerce and things like that. And well, I'm like, don't you shop on Amazon or wherever? Like when you're sitting on the couch at 9 p.m. and you need to order something, where do you go? Right. We all do it. So let's just realize where the patient is. Let's try to meet them there. And if you're dropping a vision plan, and you have to understand, if you were the patient, you'd probably say, well, let me see what it's like this year to get my exam covered and see what happens. And hopefully your services were good enough that they will want to come back to you. And it's good to hear. It's nice to hear from your perspective that does slowly happen over time.
It does. But it does mean you have to be exceptional. You can't be mediocre and expect people to remember that they should come back.
Yeah.
So there's a constant pressure on you to be the absolute most amazing eye exam at every level of customer service.
That's important, though. I think that's what we have to do in general, the way the industry is going with all the disruptors and the players in the market and the way things are changing. The only way for us to thrive is to be exceptional. We can't be mediocre, because that mediocre, that middle of the bell curve, that market is just going to get gobbled up. So we don't want to be there anyways. So I do want to quickly talk about atropine. So that's what I wanted to change the topic back to. I was just telling you offline that the first time I heard about the LAMP2 study was something that you posted just very recently. And, we've been using atropine as a treatment for myopia, or, as myopia management for years. And it's been working well. 0.05% is what I've been mostly on for years now. But you've recently posted about the potential use for atropine as a preventative measure for potential myopic patients or pre-myopic patients, however you want to phrase it. I'd love for you to just share a little bit about that, please. And, I just want to kind of open, pardon the pun, our eyes a little bit to the power of what's available to us and how atropine can help our patients.
So this is the recently reported LAMP2 study. It was published in the Journal of American Medical Association, I think in February. And the LAMP studies are these ongoing studies happening mostly in Asia about atropine for use in myopia management. But this is the first time they really broke down atropine as a potential for prevention. And so what they did is they enrolled 474, I'm looking at the study data right now, 474 children between the ages of 4 and 9 that had no myopia at the time where the study was initiated. And they split them into 3 groups. One group got a placebo eye drop. I could never figure out from looking at what the placebo, obviously it wasn't atropine, but I guess like maybe a saline or rewetting drop. Okay. One got 0.01% atropine nightly, and one got 0.05% atropine nightly. And at the end of a 2-year time period, 53% of the kids using the placebo drop developed myopia. 45.9% of the kids using 0.01% atropine did. And the kids using 0.05% atropine, only 28.4% of them developed myopia. Yeah. So obviously significantly reduced their risk of myopia development at the end of that 2-year mark. Now, obviously this was only over 2 years, and I'm sure they're going to continue to look at this study results going on, but this is just kind of one more check mark for 0.05% atropine as the most effective control, and kind of at least opens the door for consideration. Let's say you've got a kid whose parents are highly myopic and they're very motivated to prevent it. And I have these parents in my practice. They're like, what can we do now? Like, I know they're fine now, but and all I've been able to tell them is try to get outside a whole lot, try to limit screen time, and so this is potentially now, in my opinion, on the table. And I have never had any child develop side effects from atropine use besides light sensitivity.
Hmm.
And that has always been managed, for me, at least in my practice, by lowering their concentration to a tolerable level. And so I do have patients on 0.01% atropine. And I know the study data says that's not as nearly as effective, but in some of my patients where that's all they can tolerate, I still have been able to achieve really good results with the concentration that they could stand. So
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm the same, for me in practice, it's the same way. Parents are coming and I start the conversation before the patient is myopic, especially if I see the risk factors, siblings are myopic or parents are myopic, things like that. I'll just mention it like now. I'll say, you know what, normally at his age, I would say he'd be good to go for a long time. But with the trends in the, prevalence of myopia and the way we're on digital devices all the time, there's still a chance that he or she may become myopic, and we want to keep, our eye on that. But if a parent is myopic, I'm having that conversation a lot more. Now I can actually offer this as a potential preventative measure. And I'm excited because, yeah, you're right. Parents, many of them are very motivated. And I would just want to echo exactly what you said about the side effects. Light sensitivity. I've had a couple of patients who mentioned a little bit of near blur. But that's the near blur is usually pretty tolerable. The light sensitivity on occasion is less so. I've dropped it down to 0.02. I do that for 6 months, and then I put them back on the 0.05 actually.
oh, interesting.
And
And
they
they
tend to
can
do
tolerate
okay.
it better.
Yeah, they tend to do okay, I guess.
Oh, great.
That's been working pretty well. So anyways, that's just I think, yeah, like you said, another check mark for low dose atropine, especially 0.05. Just in case there's somebody out there who's a little hesitant to, put their young patients on a pharmaceutical agent. There's a lot of studies like low dose atropine has been studied for so long anyways, and it's been shown to overall been quite useful. And a lot of people ask questions about, well, when do I stop and what's the rebound effect? There's data on that too. So, check that out. And I'll actually taper patients now. And I found that that's been quite good. And over the last few years, I've been seeing quite stable results.
What's so interesting is in the States, this is an off-label treatment, of course, not FDA
Same
approved. And
here.
so
Yeah.
this is the biggest conversation I have around atropine with parents is trying to explain and discuss that, but we're still providing all of the great amount of scientific data behind atropine and why I personally feel very comfortable in prescribing it. And I would use it in my own child.
Yeah.
But there is, or excuse me, I think not more than just one company. There may be multiple companies who are currently undergoing FDA clinical approval process, and it's
Yes.
going to be 0.01%
Oh,
concentration
is
of
it?
atropine.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
good.
my understanding. So that's going to be very fascinating, though, when we get the clinical data readouts. I'm not opposed to it. Before LAMP got published, I was prescribing 0.01% atropine routinely as my concentration because I
Mhm.
think the earlier Adam study data looked very favorable about
Mhm.
that. And I had, within my own practice, a lot of success with that low concentration. Obviously, after the LAMP2 data came out with the 0.05% being the most efficient dosage in that study, I tried to make that switch over. But I've had people who've been on 0.01% for their entire childhood with no real progression. And I was like, well, I really don't see a need to
Hmm.
increase your strength. So
Yeah, that's
I
cool.
think if that study data looks really strong, I think practitioners will really embrace whatever the FDA approves.
Yeah, I think that's going to be but at least that'll open the doors to them prescribing something, which is really, I think, where we're at right now, is encouraging our colleagues to just start somewhere. And then, we'll talk more. And I think we dove a little deeper than maybe I was planning to on some of the stuff that we talked about today, which is great. But like ultimately the message that this year, I'm going to be sharing this quite a bit throughout the podcast is like, just get started. Give it a shot. You're not going to harm the patient if you stick with kind of these 3-4 options that we know are proven and work well. You're not going to do any harm, which is always the number one thing we want to make sure of. But then you can help so many people, and of course, there's the potential for improving the bottom line if you do the fee structure and everything correctly. You can actually help boost the business, which we want to do as well.
I
So.
think we all have those patients, right, that are -10 with myopic maculopathy or retinal
Mhm.
detachments or glaucoma. My father-in-law has severe stage glaucoma, never had eye pressure over 18, highly myopic, super myopic nerve. Like this is a classic example of how myopia can be the biggest risk factor for your patient. And
Mhm.
I from seeing this happen in my own family, it's like, oh my gosh, whatever I can do to protect my patients from this, because trying to treat myopic related glaucoma is extremely difficult because high pressure is not really the problem here. It's almost like a normal tension type of glaucoma.
Right.
It's just the tissue is really stretched and really damaged. And it is tough. And I know as doctors, we want to help protect our patients from having that in their future.
Yeah. And I think as humans, we always have trouble really, looking forward that many years to understand, this is a reason
Yeah.
why we don't work out as well as much as we should, or eat healthy as much as because we have trouble understanding 30, 50 years from now what the impact of our current decisions are going to be. But that's our job as doctors, is to at least let our patients know and our parents know, how we can help them. So thank you, Jen. Jen, before we wrap up, how can people find you? Where can people find you? Whether it's blog or social media or however you'd like them to get in contact.
So my blog is idolatryblog.com. I'm on Instagram quite a bit. I have not made the TikTok transfer. And as a mom of a 3-year-old, I probably won't be, because I need to do less social media and more real life time. But yeah, I'm at idolatry on Instagram because idolatry was already taken, believe it or not.
Interesting. The EYE Dollatry was already
I
taken?
know. Yeah, there's
No.
another account
Who
with
is
that
that
already.
person?
So I have a weird period in mine, but it is what it
EYE
is.
EYE.Dollatry
You got it.
is the Instagram handle. What's the blog?
Blog.com.
Idolatryblog.com. Got it. EYE.Dollatryblog.com. Cool.
Because also idolatry.com was
Interesting.
poached
Who are these
away from me.
people? What are they
I
doing with
know.
their lives?
These internet squatters.
I'm telling you,
They
they're not getting 50,000 page views a month. That's for sure.
This is
Pointless.
because yeah, I mean, like, you make these mistakes early on, right? But like, I started blogging in 2011, and so of course I used free blogspot account. And then, the point of those accounts was for them to, like, you have someone else
Mm,
recognize it was getting big and then poach the URL. So,
I
you
see.
live and learn, basically. Like, I
Yeah.
did a lot wrong. So if you want to know what not to do, probably just send me a message. I've
Get in
I've
touch
done
with
it
Jen.
already.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got aboutmyeyes.com was the website I decided I was going to go with years ago. So I've just kept that one. I was
Okay,
like, I
you
don't
got
think
your
that's,
own URL from the beginning.
yeah, I purchased that like a
See,
while back.
I mean, nothing's for free.
Yeah.
You
But
should
that's
I
not,
should have done
but
that
that's
from
not
the
going to
start.
be as in demand as idolatry.com, I imagine.
I probably
Anyway,
could buy it from whoever that person is. I just don't want to.
yeah, don't give them the satisfaction.
No.
It's it. Out of spite, you won't. Okay, Jen. Every episode, you probably know this already. I ask 2 questions at the end of every episode to every single guest, and I want to ask those to you now, please. The first of those questions is, if we could hop in a time machine and go back to a point in time that was difficult, it was a struggle, whether you were younger, well, generally when you were younger, feel free to share that moment if you'd like to. But more importantly, what advice would you give to young Jen in that moment of struggle?
Yeah, I mean, this is I always feel bad, but, like, my darkest time was when I really wanted to have a family, and I was really struggling with fertility, and I know a lot of people have been there,
Yeah.
and there is literally nothing that I can say that will help you go through that process, but I just wanna let you know, like, I was there too, and, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. It just, like, even hurts me to think about, because I know a lot of my friends are dealing with this right now,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they haven't had that success that they're so hoping for, and there's really
Mm.
nothing that I can say that will help them. So, but there's dark times for everybody, and just trying to find love in the people around you that support you when you're going through that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I can only imagine how difficult that time was. And yeah, and we know multiple people, and we know so many people over the years, and we've been blessed to have our family. But when you get to that age and you start to have kids, and people around you are having kids or trying to, you start to see the challenges. It is mind blowing. Like, you just didn't realize when we were younger, like, how difficult this process is, even for people who have kids, how hard it is when they're going through that. It's crazy. It's a miracle. And, I think definitely that message of, find love in the people around you and talk to other people who have gone through it. Hopefully that will help you to some degree. And those of us who have had kids should take that as a sign to be more grateful for what we have, I think.
Yeah. And it does, like, I make no apologies about working part-time. I like leave early. Patients will call in and be like, well, I need an appointment after 5. And I'm like, Dr. Lyerly's last appointment's at 3:30. And my patients will be like, well, that doesn't work for me. That's like, they'll get a little bit upset. And I was like, just tell them, like, she's got to get to daycare. I got to pick up my kid. Like, I want to spend time with my child. There's nothing for me to apologize about that. No. So I am very, very thankful that I was able to have my daughter as part of my life. And I never apologize for putting her first, putting my family first, and spending time with them as like goal number one. And then I love what I do. I absolutely love optometry. And when I'm at the office, 100%, you have my full focus and attention. Like, I am your doctor, and I'm not thinking about anything else. But I always make sure that my family is taken care of first before I get into the office.
That's great. No, it's great, and thank you for sharing that. Again, I know that's difficult. I can only imagine. So for sharing that, and also then I think hopefully opening the door for others to share their story and their struggles, so they can get a little bit of support and consolation as well. So thank you. So Jen, the last question is, and everything that you've accomplished to this point in your career, how much of it would you say is due to luck and how much is due to hard work?
Yeah, I love it when you ask this question, because I feel like there's a universal theme, right? Like, you have to give yourself the opportunity for lucky things to happen to you, like, so there's no way for one to exist without the other. There's doors open because you're in situations to meet people. And I think many of us have seen, like, knowing people, being in the same room, making friendships that's the stuff that luck is built on. And so giving yourself the opportunity to be in the place for something good to happen to you. But that takes the work to do
That's
that.
the hard work. Exactly. That's awesome. That's a great answer. It is. You ruined the whole podcast.
I'm so sorry. I can't believe I have a
That's okay. I'm totally joking. Of all people, the podcaster herself has her phone ringing on. I'm just
What
joking.
was I thinking?
I'm
Oh
just
my God, this
kidding,
is super embarrassing. Daryl's
At least it was at the very end of the podcast. It's great. Thank you so much, Jen. Honestly, thank you again, like I said, in multiple ways for being so supportive of me in my journey here. Thank you for being a mentor to other ODs and colleagues, and thanks for coming on to share your wisdom here on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, and y'all have a wonderful rest of your day if anyone tuned in.
There's so many people tuning in, Jen, just for you, I promise. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I hope you found so much value from this. Jen is such a lovely person. Again, make sure you give her a shout out on Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. Let people know that we were chatting and Jen shared all this amazing insight. And I will catch you again in the next episode. Take care, guys.